I want to thank everyone for joining us here at Smart City Expo USA. I have the good fortune of being surrounded. And I want to make sure you guys can hear me. Okay, can you hear me fairly well? Back row? Okay, good, good. I have the good fortune of being surrounded by two amazing leaders who, as we prepared for this session, sometimes you have sessions and you expect one thing and you get something completely different. But these are two incredibly innovative leaders who are doing some really big things, helping change the game in equitable housing. I'm going to allow them to introduce themselves. But I have Kimberly Driggins here with me, Executive Director of the Washington Housing Conservancy, and Ashley Bell, the CEO of Ready Life, a new friend and an old friend. I am Steve Benjamin, the former mayor of Columbia, South Carolina, former president of the U.S. Conference of Mayors and the African American Mayors Association. I had the benefit of interfacing with the leaders of this conference many years ago when I helped establish the Mayor's Leadership Institute of Smart Cities at NYU. And we've all been working aggressively over years. Me as a mayor, using traditional sources of funding, LIHTC and others, to try and aggressively improve our stock of affordable housing and workforce housing, leveraging CDBG funds and the like in our city. But the world in which we're living in right now is a lot more complex. There's a whole lot more opportunity, particularly if you're decide you're really going to ideate and innovate. And we are fortunate again to have two amazing leaders with us. I'm going to give them each several minutes to introduce themselves to you. And then we're going to have a couple of questions, and within our time limit, we're going to see if we have some questions from the audience as well. So, Kimberly Driggins, stage is yours.
Thank you, Steve. Hi, good morning. Good afternoon, everyone. Again, my name is Kimberly Driggins, and I'm the Executive Director of the Washington Housing Conservancy. We're a 501c3, not-for-profit. We were established in 2018, so we're really new. We're a startup. And we were created to mitigate displacement and to promote economic mobility for the residents of the DC region. And we created a social impact investing tool to help us do that. We actually focus on workforce or essential housing. We focus on mixed income housing. And we focus on existing market rate affordable, also known as NOAA, naturally occurring affordable housing. So many of you might know that space. A lot of market rate investors are heavily investing in that space. But this is the housing stock, the affordable housing stock, that is being lost at the greatest rate, no matter where you live in the country. It is certainly true in strong market cities like New York, DC, Atlanta, the entire state of California, Denver, pretty much anywhere, Miami for sure. So what we did, and we were started by the business community, Federal City Council, which is a business interest group, Fortune 500 CEOs group in DC, and JBG Smith Company, which is the largest real estate developer in the DMV. That's our DNA, and we were created to fill a gap in the market. Most affordable housing not-for-profits use the tools that Steve was talking about, and it's designed that way. However, again, in the NOAA or market rate space, where we feel there's opportunity to capture affordability, maintain affordability, and provide community and wealth-building opportunities for our residents. So I could go on and on. I'm very passionate about what I do. Just by way of background, I have over 20 years of experience in urban planning and development. I worked in DC government for 13 years, the city of Detroit for 3. So I really understand the need to innovate in this space. And I really understand that the current tools in our toolkit won't get us there to solving the housing affordability crisis in this country that just keeps getting worse and worse. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Ashley to introduce himself, and then we can kick it off with some questions. Thank you.
That's my job, Kimberly.
I'm taking over.
I only get a few words here, so. So, Ashley, Ready Life is a new name for some people here. Why don't you tell us exactly what you've been doing?
Well, thanks, Mayor. I can still call you Mayor, right? That's how it works? Yeah. So, Mayor for life. My name is Ashley Bell. I'm a retired lawyer, thank God. I've known Steve for a long time. I've previously was a partner at the largest law firm in the world, focusing on corporate banking and finance. I also was the entrepreneurship and innovation senior policy advisor at the White House. And I also served as regional administrator for the Small Business Administration and was a part of the COVID task force that ultimately created and implemented what became the Payroll Protection Program. All these things are important because it's really highlighted what has been my purpose and mission, which is how do we close the racial wealth gap? How do we provide access to opportunity? And the reality is that when you look at the racial wealth gap, is one big issue. It's housing. If you don't own your home, and unfortunately for African Americans in our country, 60% of us go to bed every night under a roof that we don't own. And when we think about the average age of the first-time black homeowner, the average age of the first-time black homeowner is 48. At 48, that person signs a 30-year fixed mortgage, but the average black person lives to be 75. That doesn't add up. That means you still owe a mortgage and you're 3 years after you're dead. So Ready Life was created to decrease, take down a decade off the average age of people in underserved communities being able to buy a home, and to remove institutional barriers. Now, a lot of you, probably my age or around, we lived in a world where credit scores were everything. Some people obsessed with them. You know, you got your Credit Karma, you're checking it every day, trying to figure out what I got to do to gain some points, lose some points. And some people think their credit is so shot, they don't even look. It's like, I'm just going to live my life, do what I can, I don't care about it. But there's so many studies that show that credit scores have led to mental health challenges, self-esteem issues, how people view themselves and their families. But the reality is credit scores were not around until 1991. So it's a farce that we can't do housing without credit scores. They just were invented in 91. So what Ready Life does is, for the first time since 91, it is a mass offering of mortgages without credit scores. Now, how do you do that? You fund them through private equity and corporate balance sheets. So once you fund a mortgage, if I'm just loaning you some money and I say, look, you know, well, flip it. Maybe you're loaning me some money. You say, all right, Ashley, you want to get a mortgage. Now, for me to loan you a mortgage, let's talk about what that looks like. And so I hope today our conversation can be around what is a practical conversation between two people if one's going to lend the other one money. What are the real questions that matter? Not what's baked into a credit score determining whether or not you paid a hospital bill late or a credit card was late 5 years ago, but some kind of way that still affects you today. None of that stuff matters. What really matters is, what are you paying right now for the roof over your head right now? And do you pay that on time? And at Ready Life, if you can show us that you're paying for your mortgage, your rent right now, whatever you're paying, we will take that rent payment and transfer it to a mortgage payment. So if you're paying $5,000 a month in rent, we can qualify you for a mortgage as long as it's not more than whatever you were paying in rent. Because our investors believe that if you're going to pay the same amount of money for rent as you do mortgage, then why wouldn't you pay that on time? Why would you not continuously pay for something that's actually creating you wealth? And so we can dive into how we get there, why we do that. But I think the bigger part of what we're all talking about today is that affordable housing has a lot of components to it. You got to talk about supply. You got to talk about those areas where people, the price is pricing out so many people. But you also have to go to the fundamental barriers of getting a mortgage in this country. And the number one fundamental barrier is going to be credit scores and down payments. If you can't attack those two challenges head on, then you're going to continuously see what we see today, which is 60% of black people renting and 56% of Hispanics in our country renting, when over half of those in that amount of people have enough money to own a home, but are blocked out by credit scores.
That's fantastic. I love the way how you tell us what you do, then you say why you do it. Kimberly, I was touched in our earlier conversation about how some of the research and work of Dr. Andre Perry and Dr. Raj Shetty informs your work. Could you talk about that, maybe a little bit more, why you do what you do?
Sure, that's a great question. So we focus on preservation of multifamily rental properties. So Ashley rightfully identified the barriers to home ownership being credit and down payment. So on the rental side, most of us rent before we own, and we're really trying to keep expenses reasonable. We know in the DC market, almost 50% of people are paying over a third of their income on rent. That's facts, and who is overly rent burdened has increased, especially since COVID. So focusing not just on the most in need, but on that workforce, folks that have a decent wage job, such as your first responders, your teachers, your hospitality workers, your police and fire people. We think that they need some help with respect to housing affordability. But where are folks living? In this country, affordable housing has always gone where the dirt is the cheapest, not necessarily where it's needed most. And what I mean by that is that oftentimes there's NIMBYism with affordable housing, and people don't want affordable housing in high opportunity neighborhoods. That's the Raj Chetty work. We know that zip codes drive life outcomes, and largely where you live, there's about the research is very clear. Only about 1 in 4 that's living in like a low opportunity neighborhood really gets out from that neighborhood and out onto economic mobility. So focusing on high opportunity neighborhoods, that's where there's already a level of investment. The schools are on the rise, or they're good. There's access to quality transportation, access to fresh and healthy food. That's where we're operating. So we are operating where displacement pressure is the greatest. In Washington, the entire region has been gentrifying, and it's been gentrifying for over the last 10, 15 years. And we really think that people who really withstood the worst of their neighborhood should really be able to benefit from the investment that the entire region is seeing. And so we're really focused there, but anyone who knows anything about affordable housing knows that it's extremely expensive, and really thinking about cost per unit. And that's where our financing comes in. But that's why we're operating where we're operating. And with that, I'm going to pause.
Sure. Thank you. Ashley, you indicated some of the numbers you're working from, 60% of African Americans, 65% of Latinos. I'm sure there's a significant number of white Americans as well there. Half of them being able to potentially afford a mortgage. So I get a sense is, what do you think the real opportunity is there? If your thesis proves out,
Yeah.
What does Ready Life look like as a company down the road? And then maybe from both of you, how can people in this room support exactly what you're doing with their voices or their time, talents, and treasures?
You know, what's important is to go back to the why. You know, I co-founded this company with Dr. Bernice King, the youngest daughter of Martin Luther King Jr. She's never founded a for-profit company before in her life. She told me, she said, Ashley, the only reason that I would jump into this space is because I knew this was where my father was headed before he was assassinated in Memphis. I knew that the next mission was economic justice. And he spoke of the inseparable twins, that there were inseparable twins of racial and economic justice. And you cannot talk about racial injustice unless you talk about economic injustice. They cannot be separated. So if we talk about why we do this and where we go from here, this is an opportunity for us to reset the table. When you look at a credit score, how can we honestly look at a system that, a lot of people don't know this, but a credit score system is set up so that at any one moment in America, half of our people have a credit score over 700, and the other half will have a credit score below 700. It's not about you individually. It's you versus everybody else. It's your average versus everybody else. So we have a system that was set up for half of us to be okay, and the other half make it expensive to be middle class, or even more expensive to be poor. So if you separate our country to where they have no way for only half of us to succeed, who do you think that other half at the bottom looks like? That half that is below 700 is a lot of single mothers, black, brown, yellow, any color you can think of, but that is the underserved. So it's not fair. The credit score system cannot be fair if you're telling people in that bottom below 700 percentage that some kind of way, despite everything that we know America has done and to support these institutional crises, that they have a fair shot, an equal shot of getting access to owning a home. And that's what we're focusing on. What does that equal shot look like? The equal shot looks like if you pay your rent on time. The word rent should not be forever. Rent should be a temporary mindset. Because if you live in a community that has a renter's mentality is what brings about all the ailments in our community now. That's what hurts our schools. That's what crime comes from. All the things that we know about breaking the cycles of poverty starts with a mentality that we don't own where we are, and it's not ours. So the future of our country and the future of Ready is to put our country from a renter's mentality and empower and give agency to the people below 700 to have an owner's mentality. Because once you own your home, your property value goes up because everybody cares about their neighborhood. You care about how your neighbor's trash is looking. You're making sure everybody's on the same page. And when property values go up, what do we fund? What is the number one thing we fund with our property taxes? Our schools. And once you fund the schools, then you see better education. You see lower crime. This is the beginning of breaking that cycle.
And how can these folks help?
And how can these folks help? Absolutely. ReadyLife.com is our website, ReadyLife.com. And October 1, you can download us on Android and on the App Store. We are banking as a service. So what this looks like, practically speaking, you bank with us. We underwrite your mortgages purely off of cash flow. We're not looking at credit. You bank with us. It doesn't cost anything. There's no charge. You pay nothing. You get a debit card in the mail. You bank with us. And we look and see, as you bank with us, how we can underwrite you. And the last thing I'll say about this, it's not about getting a mortgage just to have a mortgage sake. It's about giving you a mortgage that you can actually pay. Our interest rates at Ready will be cheaper right now than most banks because I'm not getting my money from a federally reserve insured bank. So every time you see the federal interest rates go up, that doesn't apply to us because we get our money from private corporate balance sheets. So we're actually cheaper than everywhere else right now, because we're taking our money off of private sector balance sheets instead of FDIC. So ReadyLife.com is how you can find us.
Kimberly, how can we help the Washington Housing Conservancy and maybe also help spread the work you're doing other places?
Great. You can visit our website. We have an impact investing vehicle that's open to anyone who might want to invest in what we're doing. That's number one. And again, you can find that information out. It's a triple bottom return. You accept a lower rate of return on investment for a triple bottom line: social, environment, and financial. That's one. And you can donate to the Washington Housing Conservancy. We also are actively fundraising philanthropic funds around raising the capital that we need to acquire the multifamily apartment buildings. And also we're thinking about how we spread. We've gotten a lot of interest from a lot of cities around the country. So we're thinking about a housing and mobility lab that's really about a think tank to really promote what we're doing across the country. And I will say this, just have a minute, just to say that the impact pool or the social impact investing, that you're going to see across the country. There's a lot of impact funds right now that are looking at affordable housing because it's a really safe investment. So that's not unique. However, how they deploy their funds and where they deploy them, a lot of not-for-profits actually aren't designed to work in the NOAA space. And so that's what's a little bit different about us. It's how our kit of parts are organized that have actually made the difference and our ability to have success. So the impact funds are really what's hot right now, but having a not-for-profit that's focused in the NOAA space, that's committed to keeping rents affordable and thinking about economic opportunity, mobility, that's the difference. And we have a very strong, robust social impact program where we talk about that, and we can discuss that in the Q&A if there's interest.
Fantastic. As she tees up my Q&A session, you're taking my job.
Co-moderator right there.
Co-moderator, I love it. Questions from the audience? Any questions for our two incredible panelists? I'll go with you first, sir, and then ma'am, please.
Thank you very much. The question is for Ashley. It sounds like there isn't a role.
Ooh, oh, I was coming.
Thank you. I really enjoyed the panel discussion. Question for you, Ashley. It sounds in your remarks, but you tell me if I heard them correctly, that there isn't a role for the rental market in affordable housing and communities. Did I hear that correctly?
No, there actually is a role for the rental market. I just don't want renting to be a forever concept. It should be a temporary concept. One of the first investors in Ready, and right here in where we are in South Florida, one of the largest multi-family unit owner in Florida is American Landmark. They have 35,000 units, most of them throughout South Florida. They were the first to sign up and invest in Ready, and we market to every single one of their tenants because the owner of this company doesn't want people to rent from him forever. He totally understands that for him to be competitive in the marketplace, for him to treat his tenants right, he has to be talking about how he gives them a great experience while they're with him. But in 18 to 24 months, they don't need to be going to another apartment complex. They should be going to a home that they own. So we're leaning into that, to that space. And how we get a lot of our participants is, one, through multifamily rental unit owners. Landlords, they like us. If they have the right mindset, understand that this should be temporary. Realtors like us. Realtors love the fact that we're increasing the pool for people to be able to own a home. So whether you're a realtor, a landlord, a pastor, there's multiple ways that we partner with people to offer this so they don't have to have the mentality that for whatever reason they have to rent the rest of their life.
Fantastic. Thank you. Ma'am?
Hi, my name's Alicia. I'm from Atlanta. Ashley, I had a question for you, too. I read in the news that you were launching...
Pull the mic a little closer.
Oh, okay. Hi. Alicia from Atlanta. I read in the news that you were launching City by City. Is this something that anybody can apply for in October, or is this...
Yeah, so that's a great question. Where do we offer? We are eligible to lend mortgages and to do financial transactions in 48 states. Unfortunately, one of them that I can't do business in right now is New York, and the other one's Hawaii. So as long as you're not in New York and Hawaii, we're good to go. Now, I'll be in New York by hopefully March of next year. So all my New Yorkers, hold on with me now. Don't give up yet.
Thank you.
And as a New Yorker, it's like, why? It's lady in front. All right.
Thank you so much for being here. My name is Liz Rodriguez. I am originally from New York, grew up in Miami. Can you hear me now better? Okay. Grew up in Miami. My parents had like this amazing idea about retiring in South Florida, as many people do, especially a lot of New Yorkers. So I grew up in Miami. I am very multicultural. I speak several languages. I'm now in real estate. I have been now for a while, but I'm also seeing what you were saying about the renter, okay? Miami, unfortunately, has had approximately 70% of people that have been a rental community, and not that many are actually homeowners. And it started becoming an issue the minute that the rates dropped, and everyone wanted to be in Miami. So from a local perspective, as a Miamian, that I've really engaged and love my city, and even though I'm a world traveler as well, this kind of idea is really difficult from a realtor perspective to tap that in, because now a lot of Miamians don't feel that they can actually stay here or can afford here because salaries stay the same. So what do we do to be able to educate is come to places like this. So I really thank you so much for bringing this out to the attention, but also from a local perspective, how can then I better and partner with someone like you, being from a realtor perspective?
So I would say that, you know, Miami is facing a severe housing affordability crisis. And in the class that I teach at Harvard, we used Miami data as a case study. And it really actually starts with really mitigating how the rent burden. You can't own a home, even if your credit score is good, if you don't have any savings. So it's really about the continuum to economic mobility, and it's really about helping make sure that the rents stay reasonable, and you need more. The government can't do that alone. And I know in Miami, most of the funding goes to the most in need, as it should. So you need public-private partnerships that are actually thinking about the ecosystem of who needs affordable housing. And you know, there's a lot to say here because there's a lot of stigma. When people hear affordable housing, they hear public housing, they hear less than. We heard some of the negative tropes around renting, but that's everyone starts out, for the most part, there. But how do you help residents actually build wealth? How do you not penalize them for increasing their wealth? A lot of the affordable housing comes with you can't earn more than because it's income certified. So, being in a mixed income environment where you can actually build your income and still stay in a reasonably priced apartment, that's the first step. And I will tell you that I know Miami-Dade is looking at an impact fund. We've been in conversations with them. They're pretty far along. That's the first step, is actually increasing the supply of rental housing for all Floridians, not just the most in need, but for all. And that's your teachers, again, your workforce. Those are the folks that are actually moving out because the resources aren't here to keep them. And that's across the country, actually.
And I think I'm getting the hook. I'll go close on that unless I have time for one more question. We have one more. Okay, please, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your panel today. I am Joe Pena, Research Associate with the American Planning Association. I spend a lot of time thinking about spatial connections to some of these systemic issues that we're facing. My question for all three of you actually is, are there any examples of public sector initiatives or electeds potentially who have supported nonprofit and for-profit efforts to increase affordable housing in a way that you see as appropriate? I ask as somebody who serves public servants, and folks are looking to shake systems up, but potentially in a way that maybe there are examples in other parts of the country that have been effective. Thank you.
I'll jump in here really quickly. I think for me, how we looked at how we're structuring our mortgages, a lot of it came from the crisis of COVID. When COVID hit, it hit everybody, so we had to all rethink how we look at paying your mortgage. But why should we look at the things that were available during COVID, such as forbearances and all of that, just in a crisis mode? So with Ready, how we look at it, we look at down payment. If you can afford first month's, last month's rent and a deposit, that's about 3 months' rent. That's our down payment. We want you to have 3 months of mortgage. That cash means everything. JP Morgan's study showed having 3 months of cash to cover your rent is important. It gives you a higher likelihood of having success. But I also took from what we saw that the government was able to do with forbearances during COVID, that we're going to bake into some of our mortgages 3 to 5 forbearances in the beginning. Because the key is things happen. Black people are the first to get fired and the last to get hired back every time something bad happens in this economy. Knowing that, then why would I not allow for someone, if they just got fired, why would I not say, okay, you got 3 or 4 times that you can take that 1 month's payment and tack it on the back end of your mortgage? I'm not losing that money. I'm just moving that money, because it's better for me to make sure that person stays in their home, just like it was when COVID hit and you created the forbearances. So I think there's a lot of lessons that we learn from COVID in a crisis that actually need to be rethought about in times that are not as much of a crisis.
To answer your question specifically, I would ask you to look at Washington, D.C. The mayor, Mayor Bowser, is doing amazing things. She just actually announced, so what governments can do specifically is actually think about down payment programs. And D.C. has a very aggressive, they just increased their limits. The highest that they'll be able to provide for the lowest in need is $200,000. That represented like a 50% increase. This is down payment assistance for home ownership. There's a program called Pathways to Opportunity and expanding the middle class. And DC's on the forefront of providing not just home ownership opportunities, but also rental with organizations like myself. But that one is pretty phenomenal, and it's gotten a lot of press over the last couple of weeks.
Sure, no, great innovation in D.C. I'd encourage you to maybe take a look at the U.S. Conference of Mayors and the National League of Cities, and then also the African American Mayors websites, because they actually highlight several of the innovative programs. When I served as mayor, we actually established a down payment program in which we sequestered several years of our CDBG dollars. We held in those dollars and then used them to pay a down payment for folks who were at 80% AMI up to 120% AMI. We would put down 20% of the mortgage amount of the house. The other 80% a traditional bank would provide. But since we were provided the 20% as what was actually a 1% loan that burned off over the course of the mortgage, it took a second to the 80% loan. The banks also gave them very favorable interest rates. So the blended rate was actually much lower than a primo customer might get at one of these 6 banks that we were working with. Over the course of time, that grew significantly. We saw a default rate that was less than 1%. And we also saw it grow to about $130 million program over time. So, I think innovation is not limited by the size of the community. It takes some aggressive. A budget is a statement of your values. Where you put your money says exactly what your city values. But I would say this in response to the work that Kimberly's doing and Ashley's new endeavor at Ready Life. Ashley made a point. We were talking about the greatest pandemic since 1918, probably the greatest economic disruption many of us have seen since 1932, on the back of the greatest social unrest we've seen since 1968, all wrapped up in a couple of years, which means that the entire slate has been cleared. We have to be thinking very aggressively and innovatively about how we change things and create more equitable housing across the country. So thank you all for joining us. Thank you for participating. And how about a round of applause for these wonderful panelists?
And you, the moderator.